One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. We've got an incredible show for you today. We've got Kim Rose on the show. She's the VP of Customer Success and Support at Buildium. Buildium's an incredible story. It's a company that I think is 15 years old, but didn't raise venture funding until just 3 years ago. So they were bootstrapped and profitable, and the founders ran that business for 12 years before they finally took on outside investment, which is just, it's a great story. It's an inspiring story. And Kim herself is an incredible executive, and she walks through both professional lessons about how to scale a customer success organization, but also life lessons about how to re-enter the workforce. She was out of the workforce for 8 years raising her children, and then she dove back in, and it was difficult, but she walks us through that story. So it's a fantastic show. We want to thank our sponsors before we get into the show. The first sponsor is Conga. Conga is the leading end-to-end digital document transformation suite. With Conga, you can simplify documents, automate contracts, and execute e-signature so you can focus on accelerating sales cycles and closing business faster. Our second sponsor is Outreach, the leading sales engagement platform. Outreach supports sales reps by enabling them to humanize communication at scale. From automating the soul-sucking manual work that eats up selling time to providing action-oriented tips on what communications are working best, Outreach has your back. Lastly, quick update on Revenue Collective. A lot of interest recently. We have our first members from Berlin, from Tel Aviv, from Paris, from Oslo, Norway, from Barcelona, in addition to a bunch of other cities. We're officially launching San Francisco, Los Angeles in the second half of the year, and hopefully Atlanta as well. And it's just been incredible. And actually next week, we're hosting our first conference. We're calling it an executive offsite. We're doing it on a boat in Chelsea Piers in New York City. We're going to go for a cruise, but we've got some great sponsors there. So if you're interested in learning more about Revenue Collective, reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/in/Sam F. Jacobs. It is that private community for revenue executives at high growth companies. Invite only, but I'm happy to tell you more. We're up to over 400 members, quickly approaching 800. So it's been an incredible story, but that's not the point for today's show. Today's show is about Kim Rose, who, by the way, is a Revenue Collective member out of our Boston chapter, and her story about how to scale a customer success organization. So thanks so much, and listen to the interview. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome back to the Sales Hacker Podcast. We've got a great show for you today. We've got Kim Rose, who is on the show. She's the VP of Customer Success and Support at Buildium, which is one of the fastest growing companies, I think, in the Boston area. And they're just doing gangbusters business. And Kim is actively working on scaling out the customer success organization. Now, Kim is an established customer success executive. She has more than 15 years experience building and scaling customer-focused organizations at SaaS companies. Her humans-first approach has transformed a traditional service component of an organization to a clear and distinctive market differentiator. As a pioneer in this quickly growing space, Kim has proven that a relationship-driven model, driven by a focus on the success of the customer, leads to rapid and efficient scale. Kim has led teams at industry-linked companies around the Boston area, including Carbonite and most recently Buildium, where Kim leads the success organization today. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are excited to have you. So I just read a very impressive bio, but we do like to start with, as we say, your baseball card. So we know your name is Kim Rose. Your title is VP Customer Success and Support. Is the company pronounced Buildium? Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Awesome. And so what does Buildium do? Tell us about the company.
Sure. So Buildium builds a product for third-party property managers. It's a property management platform on which our customers can run the entirety of their business. And so think of third-party property managers to run anywhere from a handful of properties to thousands of properties, and the platform allows them to fill listings, list vacancies, collect rent electronically, pay out owners and vendors electronically. So it's a full accounting platform and allows customers to do anything from the lead to leasing cycle to running their books to filing taxes, managing their communications with residents, owners, and vendors. So it's a sort of a full service platform for third-party property managers.
Wow. That sounds comprehensive. How old is the company?
So we are coming up on 15 years in August, which is super exciting. Company was founded by Michael Montero and Dimitri Georgakopoulos basically out of their own need to have something to manage properties that they were managing. They were engineers who invested in properties and sort of over time started to lose track of who's paid rent and who's needing it and needs to pay rent and who's late. And so they built what is kind of the foundation of the platform. And then over the years, it has grown and scaled to what it is today. So we have over now 16,000 customers and change, and continue to just grow and grow. So really, really fun stage of business.
And it's 15 years old. Is that right?
Yes.
Wow. So that's older than most. I guess when we think of startups, we think of younger companies, but they've been working on this for quite a while, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's right. That's the interesting story behind Buildium is that, Michael and Dimitri started it and kind of ran it by themselves for several years, kind of adding in engineers and customers but really bootstrapped from the beginning, and then really made a transition back a couple years ago to in 2016, right when I joined, made the decision that, this is really something they want to sort of invest and grow. And so took a round of funding in 2016 that was a strategic investment meant to help the company grow and scale. So that was sort of the turning point, the pivotal point and I joined about 2 months after that funding round closed, and it's been a wild ride ever since.
Wow.
So it's acting like a sort of a 3-year-old startup now, again, for sort of the second time.
That's fantastic. And so how many employees is the company? And you run a pretty big team. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. So we have about 250 employees worldwide. We have the majority of us are here in Boston, but we do have a couple of remote offices where we have folks in St. Louis and Seattle, out in a little town called Winthrop, Washington. We have a team in Portugal, and we have a team in India. But the vast majority, about 200 of us, are here in Boston. My team is the customer success organization. It has 3 parts. We have an onboarding team who assists with initial implementation, training, customized training and guidance for new customers. We have a customer success managers team, and then we have a customer support team, and that in the entirety is about 65 people.
Wow. That's a large team. And I'm excited to dive in, partially because there's just so much conversation right now about customer success, how to design the organization, how to compensate the organization, how that organization works with the sales team. So we're going to talk a lot about that. But first, we want to know, how'd you get here? Tell us a little bit about your story, because it's really, really interesting, and I think increasingly relevant given the diversity of the workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very winding. So I graduated college with a degree in math and a minor in physics, and I intended to be a teacher. That was sort of my dream. I was a soccer player, so I was sort of a teacher, coach was very appealing to me. High school math and science was where I was going to be headed, but I got connected to a tech startup through an alumni of the school I went to. I went to University of Richmond before I graduated, and ended up taking a job in that tech company. It was a startup that was building software to bill medical claims electronically, which of course I'm dating myself, but didn't exist way back then. And so I did that for a few years. I was primarily working as what would now be considered a product manager. It was a business analyst. I was writing specs. I was talking to customers. I was talking to providers. And so it was a really interesting role. I got married, had some kids, and decided to stay home and spend some time raising my 2 boys. And so I took 8 years off out of the workforce and sort of panicked a little bit when my youngest was, getting to, ready to go to kindergarten. And I was itching to do something, but I didn't quite know what I was going to do. I spent a lot of time thinking about going back to school and getting re-educated to go into a teaching role, because that was sort of never sort of fully removed from my mind. And I toyed with that a little bit. I was very heavily involved in the PTO at my kids' schools and doing technology projects. And I ended up connecting with a couple of friends, one of whom was the wife of the co-founder of Carbonite. And she said, that was a time back in 2006 where Carbonite was just getting off the ground, product was flying off the shelf. She said, we need help. Like, it was just crazy. It was a handful of people and they needed a QA engineer. And I didn't know anything about technology and how it had changed from, 1998 to 2006. And so I remember talking with the VP of engineering and basically saying, look, I'm sure I'll figure it out. I have almost nothing to show you that suggests that. But if it doesn't work out, then, you and we will part ways. I will probably know it before you do. And you can fire me. And he said, fine. And he gave me a shot. And I came in as a QA engineer and I spent a couple of years doing that. And then as the company grew, I just took on different roles really based on finding problems and solving problems. And so I moved through the organization. I was very grateful to have leaders and mentors who had faith in my ability to find a problem and figure it out and give me an opportunity to do that. So I moved from QA to program management, dabbled a little bit back in product management, then ended up in a business operations role where I was really managing goals and metrics across the organization with the exec team. Then I ended up moving into a customer retention when Carbonite went public, and we were really starting to focus heavily on retaining our customer base. I moved into a customer retention role, which eventually morphed into a customer success. At the time, we called it customer marketing. Customer success hadn't made its way as a title yet, but I ended up there as the head of customer marketing, which manifested itself as a customer success role.
How'd you, I guess the question is, this is you sort of said it. I mean, and on the one hand, you acknowledge like the difficulty. On the other hand, it didn't sound, it sounded like you sort of networked your way fairly quickly. But what advice would you give to people that have been out of the workforce, mothers or fathers that have been at home taking care of the kids? Like, do you have a strategy? Do you have advice? Do you have guidelines for people? Because I'm sure something that people are, I'm sure, frankly, a lot of mothers and fathers are terrified to take maternity or paternity leave in the first place because maybe they're worried about losing their spot at work. So how do you think about it?
Yeah, I suppose telling the story like that does make it sound easy and or smooth. It was neither. It was actually pretty rocky and had lots of highs and lows along the way. I think there are two things that I would tell people. One is there is an aspect of humility that, you have to kind of go back into the workforce where it will meet you. I actually had kind of a negative reaction to being a QA engineer because I had made my way into a fairly high position before I went out of the workforce. And so it was a little bit of like now I'm just a QA engineer, but I felt like I would be able to make something of it if I just sort of nose to the grindstone, figured it out. Ultimately, that role ended up being the key to my success at Carbonite, because being a QA engineer allowed me to fully understand not only how exactly the product worked, but what our customers were intending to get out of the product and what worked for them and what didn't work for them. And I got very, very close to the customer journey and the customer's expectation, which ultimately ended up being the key to my success as I moved through the organization, because I had that foundation and I was able to talk about that in a way that a lot of the other leaders and executives who had just kind of been hired into a leadership role didn't have the perspective I had on the product and the product that we delivered to our customers. So that ended up being really important. But I think, being able to meet a company, if you see the potential in a company, I think, taking any role, knowing that you will probably be given an opportunity if you seek it out to move throughout the organization. I think the other thing is be curious. Like I moved in different roles because I was curious about why things weren't working, or if I perceived something to be inefficient. I just went and fixed it. It was sort of like find a problem and fix it. And then those things, those actions ended up becoming new roles for me. And I think that's really a key for anybody really in a startup as well. That's sort of what I like about the startup is it allows you to, find a problem and go fix it. Don't wait for somebody to give you an opportunity, go get it. And that's sort of how that happened for me. But it was a little messy for sure.
Well, no, it's just really, it's impressive because I know that it's daunting, especially when you're making the decision in the first place. I think once you got the momentum of being inside the organization and demonstrating, how talented you are, probably is a little bit easier, but just that first step is often the most difficult. And is it true that, is it just Carbonite and Buildium? Are those the two companies that you've worked at since 2006?
No, actually. So after a while at Carbonite, a good friend of mine who had been on the founding team at Carbonite had left, and he had taken a role as the CEO at a seed stage startup. And the company's name is Databox. They are here based in Cambridge. And he asked me to come and join him and build the company. And so it was a group of developers from Slovenia, which is a beautiful country if you've never been there. And they came through Techstars, and they, had a product that had a little bit of traction, needed a business team behind it. So myself and a couple of marketers that I had worked with at Carbonite and my friend, Swami Kumarasan, who was the CEO, set off to kind of build that business. And, we spent a year there. There was a combination of factors, I think, that made that not the right move for me at the time. And a lot of it was the team was based in Slovenia. So we had some sort of cultural challenges and time and trying to build a business with a non-co-located team at that stage is really challenging. And yet I had children who were, my oldest at the time was going into his senior year in college or junior year in high school. And I needed to be doing college visits and getting him off and running. And so I just couldn't commit to the challenges that we had. And so about a year in, made a decision to leave that role and found my way to Buildium in August of 2016.
Well, the experience of managing and working with remote teams is just par for the course at this point in 2019. And as you mentioned, where you've got offices for Buildium and I guess Portugal and Seattle and all over the world. So now you tell us about, let's dive into the meat of the conversation, which is really about customer success. So first of all, you've got a lot of really interesting and useful insights about what it means to deliver exceptional customer success. Tell us a little bit about kind of your framework and how you think about building this organization such that it can deliver the right experiences for the customer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the one thing that attracted me to Buildium was the fact that the founders were so customer centric and customer focused. And it wasn't just words on a value wall or a mouse pad or, customers first. Everybody says it. But when I was first meeting them, it was just abundantly clear that it was not only is Buildium a mission-driven company to be, do right by not only the customers, the employees, and sort of the community around us, but really lives into the customer is the most important thing. And so for me, it was, taking that and making sure that as an organization, as a company, we don't lose sight of that as we grow, because the stage of business that we're at and where we sort of, after we had taken the funding and we said, okay, like we're going to grow really fast, that's all great, but it's very, very easy to lose sight of what's important to the customer or maybe lose a little bit of that edge. And so building the success org, when I got here, we started with basically just a handful of customer support reps. And I started looking at the data that suggested that our customers were having a problem that we called failure to launch, which basically meant they couldn't get up and running. They weren't getting to value fast enough. So that was when we started the first investment in the team in onboarding. And what they were really oriented to do is make sure that our newest customers could not only get up and running, but that we understood what they intended to get out of the software, and we could build customized training plans to make sure they got that value. So the onboarding team started with just a couple of folks, borrowed from the customer support organization, and now grew to with 15 people on that team now. And really that was the first key to making sure that we stayed aligned organizationally on what's most important for our customers and the success of making sure that they will continue to be successful and be top of mind, because now we had people post sales talking directly to them proactively immediately. So that was kind of how that was born.
Did that drive an impetus to charge for onboarding? Do you charge for onboarding? I'm always curious about that. HubSpot is adamant that, they charge, nobody gets away from paying an onboarding fee. And I think part of the reason they do that besides the money is to confirm commitment and skin in the game to actually adopting the software in the right way. Did you feel pressure to explicitly charge for onboarding?
Yeah, so actually it was interesting. We everything that we have done at Buildium, and sort of my nature is to test, learn, iterate, repeat. And so we tested our way into that. When we first rolled out onboarding, it was sort of their mission was just make the customer successful. We didn't really know what that meant. We just said, whatever you do, talk to them and make sure that they are going to be successful. And then over time, we developed playbooks and we developed sort of process, and we developed a strategy for how we were going to execute on that across different types of customers who want different types of things out of the platform. But it really started with just talk to them and make sure they're successful. There was no charge. The sales team offered it to anybody who expressed worry or concern about getting set up. That was kind of how we did it back then. As we went and learned, we then learned, okay, look at how exponentially more successful our customers are if they work with our onboarding team versus if they don't. So then we said, okay, now onboarding is required, but we're going to ascribe a fee to it, but the sales team can waive it. And that was primarily because there was a lot of reluctance. I mean, it's a hard thing. There was some pushback from sales and from the organization on like, well, wait a minute, if we charge for it, we're going to lose customers because our customers are small businesses. They're super price sensitive. And so there was definitely some reluctance to start charging. But what we found was for the customers who paid for it, we actually ended up with data that suggested they were exponentially more successful. So there was this like building case for making it a required fee, because the customers, if you worked with onboarding, you were more successful than if you didn't. If you paid for onboarding, you were more successful than if you worked with onboarding, which is more successful than if you didn't. So then it was an evolution that by the fall of 2017, we rolled out the program, which is now required, and we charge for it. But it was definitely a process.
And so onboarding is a different team. So I think, did you mention there's 3 teams? Onboarding is one of them. What are the other teams under your purview?
Customer success managers. And so the customer success managers are aimed at driving loyalty, retention, and also expansion revenue from their book of business. We have that team organized in couple of different ways. We have our largest customer segment has dedicated CSMs who do the typical CSM thing. They do QBRs, do customer visits. They are very focused on developing the relationship and bringing that voice of customer back into the organization and through product. We have a couple of CSMs for the segment below our largest, and they are dedicated CSMs for customers in that segment in their first couple of years. So that segment is fairly large, and we couldn't cover the whole segment. And so we basically said, work with the customers as if, in the same manner that the key account CSMs work, but after 2 years of working with the customer, your cadence rolls off a bit so that you can continue to work. They have a higher volume of customers they work with. And then we have what we call churn fighters, which are proactive CSMs who look at indicators of success and or leading indicators of churn and proactively reach out to those customers to see if they can re-engage them. So we have a health index or an engagement score. We look at a variety of metrics that suggest that customers are waning off the usage of the product. And so we have a couple of CSMs who are value-driven, who drive value-driven conversations with customers who appear to show signs of waning interest.
Does the churn fighting team ever proactively offer discounts, or is it purely about kind of usage and engagement with the platform?
It's generally usage and engagement with the platform. They're generally looking for things like, that we have services where customers can screen applicants. We use a third-party service where they screen applicants for their properties. And if we start to see that usage declining, it generally either means they're moving away from Buildium, or it means that, they're maybe using a different product for that. So the conversations are kind of just learning about what's going on with the customer. Sometimes we learn that, their leasing cycle is just changing and they don't have any turnover. And in some cases, we start to hear about them using a different software, and we can talk them through why using it all in one platform is better. But we put that in place last summer, and we're seeing a ton of success. And now we're actually also using those, we're slightly changing the purview of the churn fighters and actually driving proactive expansion with that team, meaning going after not just leading indicators of churn, but really healthy customers who may have an opportunity to take advantage of other services. And so we're driving proactive expansion conversations through that team as well.
There's a lot of discussion and debate for customer success teams, delineating, customer success versus, I guess, account management. And really the conversation is about to what extent revenue and money should be part of their mandate, and to what extent revenue and money should be part of their compensation plans. And there's one school of thought that says, use the customer success team, incent them, and incent them for expansion, as you just mentioned, incent them to drive new product adoption. There's another school of thought that says keep the customer success team away from revenue metrics. Maybe you give them like a gross retention metric. But basically, you want sales-oriented people doing selling so that the customer success people can sort of be pure advisors to the customer without having a clear revenue incentive to their behavior. Which school of thought, or is it a blend or a matrix, do you fall into?
Yeah, it's a bit of a blend, and I think it depends on who your customers are to a certain extent, and sort of what the consultative sale looks like. For us, they do carry a quota. The CSMs have a variable part of their comp that is 75% retention of their customers and then 25% add-on or expansion revenue target. So they do have a sales goal that they want to hit. It is heavily weighed to retention of their customer base, but I think that helps us keep top of mind the fact that what really keeps our customers around is the usage of some of our services that cause them to be sticky. So it's driving the behavior that actually incents the retention that is sort of how that picture comes together. If your customer starts using ePay, meaning their residents are paying rent online through the system, they are exponentially more sticky and they're getting more value out of the product than if they're not. Because if their residents are still walking into their office with a check and then they have to go to the bank, the software becomes kind of a side business. But if they are starting to, our promise and our value to the customer is that if you use our software, you will get time back, and you can use that time to do whatever it is that is most important to you. Maybe you want time back so you can spend more time with your family. Maybe you want time back so you can grow your business. But our software is designed to help you be more efficient and help you get your time back to do what you want. And we know that if your residents are paying rent online, that is going to give you the most time back. So how can we help you do that? And that keeps the CSM kind of oriented at making sure that their conversations are designed around helping the customer get that time back.
Did you feel like, was sort of money always part of it such that you didn't feel like you needed a different hiring profile? Because sometimes what people say is that as they layer on revenue expectations into the customer success team, they find that they're asking people that chose not to go into sales to do selling activities, and that can create a conflict. Or did you always have this profile in mind as you were building the team?
Yeah, so getting the right hiring profile has been really interesting. For everything, I would say our churn fighter profile is much more transactional, more like a BDR. So it is, lots of dials and lots of, basically sort of going through a list and prioritizing it and hitting the phone. For our CSM, for the larger accounts, what we've found really works, there is a happy mix between somebody who wants to make the sale and somebody who doesn't. We have found that the profile that works better for us is the more relationship-based account manager who is going to want to go visit the customer and want to go do those things. But we've found that there are a fair number of folks. I mean, we've not had a problem getting that profile with somebody who also wants to have the sales component. I think because there's a lot of hybrid roles, we're starting to have some success there. But it's been really interesting. We've also honed in on the hiring profile for our onboarding team, which is teachers. We're making great onboarders because it's very training based and listening to the customer's learning style and keeping them on track and, making sure that they're paying attention to what the customer is absorbing and where they need to sort of double down. And so that's been a really interesting learning for us over the last year or so.
What are your strategies? You mentioned that you work very, very closely with the sales team. How do you do that effectively? What are some of the lessons, the tools that you use to make sure that you are completely aligned with your sales team? Because obviously that sales to customer success handoff is absolutely critical in scaling a successful revenue organization.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've spent a lot of time. I have an excellent partner in the head of sales who fully understands and appreciates and absorbs all the things that are happening post-sale so that we can have really productive conversations. We provide I feel like providing a lot of context is important. So this is really across the organization, but part of the customer centricity that we have here at Buildium is that we talk about our customers all the time. And so a sales rep knows if we say the name of a customer, they know things about that customer. The product team, they don't talk about user personas in the more traditional sort of Jane Doe type of person on a slide, but they're actual customers who have been into the office or for whom we've gone, taken a group out to visit or, came to our workshops or various other things. And so when we talk about what's happening to our customers or what our customers are saying to us, we're really personalizing it and sharing that across the organization. So our sales team stays pretty close to how successful a customer is after they sales. Now, there's a high volume. So this is predominantly in our bigger customers, but it's not uncommon for us to be walking down the hall and have a sales rep kind of say, "Oh my gosh, how is Bob doing? Like, is he getting up and running? I hope you're enjoying working with him," or something like that, because they developed a relationship during the sales process and he really wants to make sure they're successful after. So I think personalizing it is really important. And then we talk a lot. We go to their sales stand-ups. We have a weekly meeting where we talk about, are we seeing any challenges? Is there a pattern? Is there something that, we can provide to the sales team for things that are hitting the customers after sale that we want to make sure we cover ahead of it. It's not uncommon for an onboarder to join a sales call to, more in depth go through what the onboarding process is going to be if a sales member has a prospect who's potentially concerned about it. We'll just hop on the call with them or we'll go to a site visit with them. So it's just really collaborative and really making sure that we view our customers as the people that they are, not just sort of a number, an MRR number, or a name on a spreadsheet or in a Salesforce record.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find, I've found, in the last couple of roles where I've been in kind of revenue leadership roles, that bringing the customer success team into the pre-sale process can be very, very powerful. Do you find yourself or the teams getting pulled into that pre-sales process? For us, it was more, enterprise sales, where we didn't want just a clean handoff. We wanted the customer to feel like, there was a group of people that were committed to their success, and they would get to know those people over even as early as, early on in the sales process. Do you find that same kind of pull that the team is getting brought into pre-sale conversations, or is it still the clean handoff that you find most dominant?
Yeah, no, we definitely are getting involved in the pre-sale conversations, particularly in our larger segments, but we would do it for anybody who wants to really make something out of that conversation. For our larger customers and larger prospects, we definitely are involved pre-sale. We actually introduce the customer to the onboarder who is going to be working with them, and that does two things. One, it's really lives into the message that we are here for them, post-sale, but it also gives the onboarder and the CSM who are in that conversation a glimpse into what the customer is looking to get out of the software before we even get started. So that conversation just rolls right on through when the customer is transitioned. So it doesn't feel like a handoff. It just feels like kind of the next conversation is with another person who already has the context for what has been going on, what the customer is looking to do, and can just say, okay, so, we heard this, and let's get you started to get you there in a short period of time. So it really works for us. And, the challenge just becomes bandwidth. To be honest, that's where we want to be involved in all the conversations, but it's just hard to do it all. So we have to be a little conscious of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. One last topic before we sort of head to the conclusion of today's conversation, but there's been just a tremendous amount of conversation and talk about the level of intensity that's required when building a company. And there's a group of people, a lot of them investors that frankly haven't worked at operating companies in a very long time, but they're adamant that, what's required sometimes is 80 hours a week, 100 hours a week, just complete immersion in the building of the company. And then there's other folks that believe that you can call it work-life balance or work-life integration, but that there needs to be some kind of relationship between where your mind goes and where your body goes, and that it can't be all work all the time if you want to run a marathon, for example. So where do you come out on this idea of like work-life balance, work-life integration, and balancing your personal life with responsibilities at work?
Yeah. So this one was a hard lesson for me personally. I'm a single mom, and so I have the demands of my kids are real. They're getting older now. My youngest is a freshman in high school, but there were a lot of times early on, and particularly in the early days of Carbonite, that I was working, 12, 14, 16-hour days. I was, working through dinner. I was, just not at all. Even if I was physically home, I was not at all present. And I started hearing about it from my kids. Like, Mom, you're never working. You're never not working. You're never not doing this. And why don't you just put your computer away? Was sort of like a very common phrase. And so it took me, I think probably when I started at Buildium, and Michael and Dimitri were not like this. And now, we've had a 3 years of a lot of growth and transition and change here at Buildium, and inclusive of Michael and Dimitri are still involved in the business, but we have a new CEO. And what has been a theme throughout has been, make sure you take time for yourself so that you can give your best to the business. And when you are just all out like that, the quality of what you can give back and your passion for doing it really is, degrades over time. So for me, it was a long time to learn the lesson, but I am so much better for Buildium, for my team, for my, achieving what we've achieved in the organization. Now that I have found a balance and understand when to say, I'm actually going home now because I want to have dinner with my kids, or it's really important for me to get to, the track banquet, or I'm going to take the day off to go visit my son at college. And those moments for me and for my family are really, really important and make me better when I'm here, because I am fully here when I'm here and I am fully home when I am home. So that was a really hard lesson for me, but I definitely think it's important to take time to recharge. And we at Buildium definitely encourage that of our teams. I will always say, even if there is a pressing issue on a Friday afternoon, and, it's unless it is a dire situation where a customer is in trouble, then we just say, you know what, we'll pick it up on Monday. And then on Monday morning, we expect to pick it up and make sure we resolve it as quickly as possible. But I want the team to have their time to make sure that they can recharge and then give their all when they're here. And so that's been the lesson I've learned. And we've been really lucky to have that culture here at Buildium where everybody understands. We had an open house a couple of weeks ago where everybody invited their families. We have a beach day where everybody invites their families. It's really important to kind of make sure that we continue to recognize that we all have other priorities outside of our day job. And whether that be a family or a pet or a hobby or something else, doing those things helps complete the picture and make sure that everybody is fulfilled in a more well-rounded way.
Yeah, completely agree. Kim, we're coming to the end of our time together. The last thing we like to do before we wrap up is sort of pay some homage to either books that have been really influential, people or mentors that have been really influential. Just pay it forward. Help us continue to walk along the breadcrumb trail and figure out what influenced you and what you think we should be thinking about. So any books, any people, any mentors, any people that you want us to know about when you think about, paying it forward and bringing some insight and enlightenment to the audience, what do you think about?
Yeah. We are big believers here in the Lencioni book, 5 Dysfunctions, The Advantage. We spend a lot of time as an exec team talking about that. We are fully immersed in Radical Candor, which is, a book Kim Scott wrote about being, sort of radically candid or truthful and open and direct with your colleagues and your peers. And so those are, sort of the books that, from a business perspective, I lean into. I reread many, many times The Power of Habit because I find myself struggling to get myself back into habits of working out or eating well or whatever the case may be. And I find that understanding the science and sort of the neurology of habits helps me get back into a good frame of mind. From people, again, I mentioned that I had a lot of people at Carbonite who believed in me and were really able to give me opportunities or encourage me to take opportunities. One of them I mentioned is Swami Kumaresan, who I eventually left Carbonite and went to work for at the startup. I hold him in very high regard. And I also am very, very lucky right now to be working for one of my awesome mentors. It's Chris Litster is the now CEO of Buildium. And Chris and I have known each other for about 30 years, and he built his career at a number of different places, most recently and notably Constant Contact. And he helped me so much through my journey at Carbonite as a mentor and a friend. And then he had the opportunity to come into Buildium, and I had the opportunity to work for him. And I love that when, you have somebody who's so important to you, and then all of a sudden you're working, day in and day out with him and learning from him, and his ability to be so compassionate and empathetic to small business owners, but also being really disciplined about, how we operate here at Buildium. It has been great.
That's fantastic. Kim, it's been amazing having you on the show. There are people out there that are listening. There may be parents that are on leave that want to get back into the workforce. There may be customer success execs that want to reach out and engage. And so what's the best way to engage with you? Maybe they want to work for you. So what's your preferred method of communication if people want to reach out that are listening?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to be an open book. I give my customers my cell phone number.
Let's not do that this time. Take your email.
I think LinkedIn is a really good way to get in touch with me. Yeah, or my email is kim.rose@buildium.com.
Awesome. So kim.rose@buildium.com, or you can find her on LinkedIn. Kim, thanks so much for being on the show. It's been fantastic.
Great. Thanks, Sam.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs, and this is Sam's Corner. What a fantastic interview with Kim Rose, who has built an incredible career as a customer success leader and is currently at Buildium, where she's running a team of over 65. Some great tactical lessons, and then some great kind of life lessons. It's not easy being out of the workforce for 8 years, and Kim did it and then came back. And the advice that she gave when she rejoined Carbonite, and she was a QA engineer, and she thought, frankly, that the role was beneath her, but she said, you have to meet the labor market, the workforce, the job market, where it meets you. And that you might not always be able to jump right back in as an executive if you were an executive when you left and when you took some time away. But if you put the effort in, if you are curious, and if you commit yourself, you can quickly rise up the ranks, at least at a high growth company. I know that's easier said than done. And I know that not everybody has those options, but I think it's an inspiring story, and it's cool. And Kim's a single mother raising 2 kids, and one of them's in college, one of them's in high school, and yet she's still building an incredible customer success organization. Obviously, also bears mentioning, she's a Revenue Collective member. She's part of our Boston chapter, so that may have something to do with it, of course, but maybe not. In terms of tactical customer success lessons, they have an onboarding team, they have a customer success team, and they have a retention team, a churn fighting team. All of those teams have some component of revenue responsibility. That's a debate that's out there. Some folks want the CSM team and anybody that's not part of the sales team to be excluded from revenue responsibilities. But Kim specifically has 75% of the comp plan for CSMs in retention and 25% in actual revenue expansion. So they have sales-like responsibilities. Really interesting insight that she mentioned. Teachers make really good onboarders because they are used to training and they're used to developing learning programs to help people learn new skills and concepts. And I thought that was really an interesting idea. And then, it's all about alignment, and it's working very, very closely with the sales team. If you want to have a great customer success organization, it needs to be bonded with the sales team. Some of that's going to come down to incentives, but some of that is going to come down to meeting cadences and sort of transparency and communication between those two teams. Kim mentioned that they have personas, but the personas at Buildium are not abstractions. At HubSpot, it's owner Ollie and marketing Mary and all of these things. At Buildium, they're actual customers. They're actual customers where they describe the problems that those customers had and the experiences that they had. So I think there's just a lot to learn in this show, particularly on customer success, but also just frankly on how to be a great executive. So I really enjoyed that episode. If you want to hear more from me, if you want to have feedback, you can reach out to me on linkedin.com/in and then /Sam F. Jacobs. Please do give the show 5 stars on iTunes so that we can be at the top of the pops and top of the charts and beat out all those other sales podcasts that are lesser in my experience. I don't know, I'm rambling right now, but don't worry about it. Just give us 5 stars. Okay, and we want to thank our sponsors, Conga, the leading end-to-end digital document transformation suite, and Outreach, the leading sales engagement platform. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.